Welcome to Deep Crime Files, where every mystery has a story. On a quiet June morning, an 11-year-old girl walked toward her school bus stop in a peaceful California neighborhood, a routine she had followed many times before. But that day she never arrived. What happened next became one of the most disturbing abduction cases in American history. A nightmare that lasted 18 years while the world moved on, unaware that a child was suffering in plain sight. This is story of Jaycee Dugard. Watch till end and don't forget like and subscribe. On June 10, 1991, Jaycee Dugard was walking up the hill toward her school bus stop in South Lake Tahoe, California, a scenic community nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains where families felt relatively safe and children often walked to school alone. Jaycee's stepfather, Carl Probin, was watching her walk up the hill when he witnessed something that would haunt him for nearly 2 decades. He saw a gray sedan pull up alongside his stepdaughter, and before he could react, 2 people grabbed Jaycee and forced her into the vehicle using a stun gun to subdue her. The car sped away while Carl jumped on his bicycle and pedaled frantically after them, screaming for help, but the vehicle quickly disappeared, leaving him devastated and helpless on the side of the road. The abduction happened so quickly, so brazenly in broad daylight, that it seemed almost impossible to comprehend, and within hours law enforcement agencies across California and Nevada were alerted. Search teams were mobilized, and Jaycee's face appeared on missing person posters throughout the region. But despite extensive efforts involving thousands of tips and numerous searches, no trace of the young girl could be found. What authorities and Jaycee's devastated family did not know was that the girl had been taken by a man named Philip Garrido and his wife Nancy, and they had transported her to a hidden compound behind Philip's mother's house in Antioch, California, approximately 170 miles away from where she was taken. Philip Garrido was a registered sex offender who had previously been convicted of kidnapping and rape in 1976. He had abducted a woman in South Lake Tahoe, held her captive in a warehouse in Reno, Nevada, where he repeatedly assaulted her, and though he was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison, he had been released on parole in 1988 after serving only 11 years, a failure of the justice system that would have catastrophic consequences. The property where Jaycee was held was a maze of tarps, tents, sheds, and outbuildings hidden behind tall fences and trees, invisible from the street and from neighboring properties. And it was in this concealed nightmare that Jaycee would spend the next 18 years of her life, stolen from her childhood, her education, her family, and her freedom. During her captivity, Jaycee was held in increasingly horrific conditions, initially kept in a soundproof shed where she was handcuffed and could not escape, and Philip Garrido repeatedly sexually assaulted her, subjecting the child to unspeakable abuse that would continue throughout her imprisonment. When Jaycee was just 14 years old, she gave birth to her first daughter, a child born from rape, delivered without medical assistance in the hidden backyard compound, and 3 years later she gave birth to a second daughter under the same conditions, both children growing up knowing only the bizarre and isolated world their captor had created. The 2 girls were never enrolled in school, never saw a doctor, and had almost no contact with the outside world. They believed Philip Garrido was their father and that Jaycee was their older sister, a deception maintained to control and manipulate the entire captive family unit. Throughout these 18 years, parole officers were supposedly monitoring Philip Garrido as a registered sex offender, conducting visits to his home and checking on his compliance with the conditions of his release. Yet somehow, despite numerous visits to the property, no one discovered the hidden compound in the backyard where Jaycee and her daughters were being held. In 2006, a neighbor called authorities to report suspicious activity at the Garrido residence, describing tents in the backyard and children living in the property under strange circumstances. Officers responded and spoke with Garrido but did not search the backyard compound, missing yet another opportunity to discover Jaycee and rescue her from her imprisonment. The failures of the parole system and law enforcement to properly investigate and monitor a known violent sexual offender would later become a source of intense scrutiny and public outrage. The case finally broke open in August 2009, not through diligent police work or parole supervision, but through the vigilance of university police officers and the suspicious behavior that Philip Garrido could no longer effectively conceal. Garrido had been attempting to gain permission to hold a religious event on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley, and he brought with him two young girls who struck campus police officers Lisa Campbell and Ally Jacobs as unusual. The girls seemed robotic, pale, and exhibited strange social behaviors that indicated they had been isolated from normal society. The officers' instincts told them something was deeply wrong, and they contacted Garrido's parole officer to report their concerns, which finally triggered a serious investigation into his activities. When Garrido was called in for a meeting with his parole officer on August 26, 2009, he brought the two young girls and a woman he introduced as Alyssa, but under questioning, the woman's story began to unravel, and when parole officers and police pressed harder, the truth finally emerged. Alyssa was actually Jaycee Dugard, and the two girls were her daughters. Jaycee's true identity was confirmed through a series of questions and eventually through contact with her mother, Terry Probin, who had never stopped searching for her daughter and had kept Jaycee's case in the public eye for 18 years. The reunion between Jaycee and her family was emotional beyond description, a mother finally embracing a daughter she thought she might never see again. But the girl who had been taken at age 11 was now a 29-year-old woman who had missed her entire adolescence and young adulthood, and she had two daughters who had never experienced freedom, education, or normal social interaction. Philip and Nancy Garrido were immediately arrested and faced numerous charges including kidnapping, rape, and false imprisonment, and as details of the case emerged, the public was horrified by the extent of the abuse and the systemic failures that had allowed it to continue for so long. The legal proceedings revealed the full scope of the Garridos' crimes and the institutional failures that enabled them. Philip Garrido was charged with 29 felony counts including kidnapping, rape, and false imprisonment, while Nancy Garrido faced similar charges for her role in the abduction and captivity. In 2011, both defendants pleaded guilty to the charges against them, with Philip Garrido sentenced to 431 years to life in prison and Nancy Garrido sentenced to 36 years to life, ensuring they would never be free to harm anyone again. The state of California also faced a lawsuit from Jaycee Dugard for the parole system's failure to properly monitor Philip Garrido despite his violent criminal history. The lawsuit was settled for $20 million. An acknowledgement of the catastrophic failure to protect the public from a known predator. The federal government also settled with Jaycee for an undisclosed amount related to the failure of federal parole supervision during the early years of her captivity. In the years following her rescue, Jaycee Dugard has shown remarkable resilience and strength, choosing to reclaim her identity and her voice rather than remain defined by what was done to her. In 2011, she published a memoir titled A Stolen Life, in which she described her experiences in her own words, providing insight into her captivity, her survival, and her journey toward healing. The book became a bestseller and helped many people understand the psychological impact of long-term captivity and abuse. Jaycee also established the Jaycee Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping families recover from abduction and other traumatic experiences, turning her own suffering into a means of helping others who have endured similar ordeals. Her daughters, who were 11 and 14 at the time of their liberation, have been provided with education, therapy, and support as they adjust to life in the outside world and process the trauma of their unusual upbringing. The Jaycee Dugard case exposed serious flaws in sex offender monitoring and parole supervision systems across the United States, prompting reforms in California and other states to improve oversight of convicted offenders and prevent similar failures. The case also highlighted the importance of trusting instincts when something seems wrong, as it was the suspicions of alert university police officers that ultimately led to Jaycee's rescue after 18 years of missed opportunities by other officials. For the community of South Lake Tahoe and for families everywhere, the case serves as a painful reminder that predators often hide in plain sight, that children are vulnerable even in seemingly safe environments, and that vigilance and strong systems of accountability are essential to protect the innocent. Jaycee Dugard's story is one of unimaginable suffering but also of extraordinary survival. A young girl who endured nearly 2 decades of captivity emerged as a woman determined to rebuild her life and help others, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, the human spirit can find a way to endure and eventually to heal. What are your thoughts on this case and the system failures that allowed it to continue for so long? Please share your reflections respectfully in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, please consider liking and subscribing for more true crime documentaries.